The hidden pressure technique used in everyday conversations, there is a form of pressure that does not look like pressure at all. It does not raise its voice. It does not demand. It does not force. Instead, it blends into normal conversations so smoothly that most people never question it. It sounds casual. It feels familiar. It appears harmless. And yet, it can influence decisions more effectively than direct control ever could. This hidden pressure technique works because it avoids triggering resistance. When someone pushes you openly, your mind reacts immediately. You defend, you question, you analyze. But when pressure is subtle, your guard stays down. You remain cooperative, believing you are simply participating in a normal exchange. That is where influence becomes most powerful, when it is not recognized as influence. In everyday conversations, this often begins with framing. A person does not tell you what to do. They shape how the situation is presented. They highlight certain aspects while quietly ignoring others. They introduce an idea in a way that already leans toward a desired outcome. And because the conversation feels natural, you do not stop to examine the structure behind it. For example, someone might say, "Most people in your position would take this opportunity." It sounds like information. It sounds neutral, but it is not neutral. It places you inside a social expectation. It suggests that refusing would make you an exception and not necessarily in a positive way. Now your decision is no longer just about what you want. It becomes about how you compare to others. Another common version is the assumption of agreement. Instead of asking, "Do you want to do this?" the person says, "So we are going ahead with this, right?" The difference is small in language, but large in psychology. The second version skips the stage of decision entirely. It places you in a position where you must correct the assumption if you disagree. And correcting feels heavier than simply choosing. It introduces friction. Many people avoid that friction, and so they comply. This is how hidden pressure operates. It reduces the ease of resistance while increasing the ease of agreement. Over time, you may start saying yes not because you fully agree, but because saying no feels unnecessarily complicated, uncomfortable, or even socially risky. There is also the use of emotional positioning. The person subtly presents themselves in a way that makes refusal uncomfortable. They may emphasize effort, sacrifice, or good intentions. They may remind you of past favors. They may express vulnerability at the exact moment you are deciding. None of these are inherently wrong on their own. But when they appear precisely at the point of decision, they are no longer just expressions. They become influence tools. Imagine someone saying, "I spent a lot of time putting this together, but of course it is up to you." On the surface, they are giving you freedom, but the emotional weight has already been placed on your choice. Saying no now feels like dismissing their effort, so your decision is no longer clean. It is entangled with guilt, responsibility, and the fear of appearing unappreciative. Another variation is urgency disguised as importance. We need to decide this now, or this is time-sensitive. Sometimes that is true, but often, urgency is introduced not because time is genuinely limited, but because thinking time would weaken the influence. When you have time, you reflect. You compare. You question. When you are rushed, you react. Hidden pressure prefers reaction over reflection. What makes all of this difficult to detect is that none of these techniques are extreme. They exist inside normal language. They appear in workplaces, relationships, friendships, and even casual interactions. That is why people often do not recognize the pattern. They feel slightly pushed, slightly uneasy, but they cannot point to a clear moment of force. And this is where the internal confusion begins. You may agree to something and later feel that it was not fully your decision. You may wonder why you did not speak up more clearly. You may question your own judgment. But the issue is not weakness. The issue is that the pressure was designed to feel like participation. One of the strongest signs of hidden pressure is the feeling that disagreeing requires more effort than agreeing. A balanced conversation allows both paths to exist equally. You can say yes or no with similar ease. But in a pressured conversation, one path becomes smoother. The other becomes emotionally or socially costly. For example, a colleague presents an idea and says, "Unless anyone has a serious objection, we will move forward." Now disagreement must be labeled as serious. If your concern feels moderate, you may stay silent. The language has already filtered what counts as acceptable resistance. In personal relationships, this can appear as subtle expectation building. "You always support me. or "I know I can count on you." These statements sound positive, but they create a pattern you are expected to maintain. Breaking that pattern feels like breaking the relationship itself, even when your needs are different in that moment. Mid-video pattern break. The most powerful pressure in your life is not the one that forces you. It is the one that makes you believe you chose it freely. Work environments are especially fertile ground for this technique. Leaders may encourage open dialogue, but structure conversations in ways that favor alignment. Ideas are introduced with confidence. Dissent is acknowledged briefly but not explored deeply. Decisions are framed as already moving forward. The result is a culture that appears collaborative but subtly directs outcomes. In meetings, this often looks like fast consensus. A proposal is presented, a few quick agreements are voiced, and silence is interpreted as approval. But silence does not always mean agreement. It often means hesitation that did not find space. Hidden pressure thrives in environments where speed replaces reflection. In family dynamics, hidden pressure often becomes part of identity. A person may be labeled as the responsible one, the understanding one, the strong one. Over time, they feel obligated to act according to that label. When a situation arises that conflicts with their own needs, the pressure is internal. They are not being forced by others directly. They are being guided by the expectation they have absorbed. This is why hidden pressure can be more persistent than direct control. It does not rely on external force. It becomes internalized. You start regulating yourself to maintain harmony, approval, or identity. You anticipate reactions before they happen. You adjust your choices before they are questioned. The key to recognizing this pattern is to shift your attention from words to experience. How easy does it feel to disagree? How much explanation is required to say no? Do you feel the need to justify simple preferences? Do you feel a subtle tension when considering a different choice? These signals are more reliable than the surface language. A conversation can sound respectful and still be restrictive. It can sound open and still guide you toward a specific outcome. Another important observation is consistency. Does the other person accept your decisions even when they do not benefit them? Or does acceptance only appear when your decisions align with their interests? True cooperation allows for divergence. Hidden pressure rewards alignment and quietly discourages anything else. To protect your clarity, you do not need confrontation. You need awareness. When you notice a framed assumption, slow the conversation down. When urgency appears, question whether it is real. When emotional weight is introduced, separate the emotion from the decision. You can acknowledge someone's effort without letting it decide your choice. Simple responses create space. Let me think about it. I am not ready to decide. I see your point, but I need to consider my own position. These are not aggressive. They are stabilizing. They return the decision back to you. And most importantly, give equal legitimacy to your no. Not every decision requires a detailed explanation. Not every boundary needs to be defended. When no becomes as valid as yes, hidden pressure loses much of its power. Because at its core, this technique depends on imbalance. It depends on one direction feeling easier, smoother, safer. The moment both directions feel equally available, the influence weakens. Everyday conversations will always contain influence. That is part of human interaction. But there is a difference between sharing perspective and shaping outcomes without awareness. There is a difference between collaboration and quiet direction. When you begin to notice how pressure can hide inside normal language, something shifts. You stop reacting automatically. You start observing structure. You recognize when a decision is being guided before it is even made. And in that moment, you regain something essential. Not control over others, but control over your own response. The ability to pause. The ability to question. The ability to choose without invisible weight. Because real choice does not need to be protected by subtle pressure. Real cooperation does not need to be disguised. It allows space, time, and difference without penalty. Anything that quietly narrows that space while pretending to expand it is not neutral. It is influence wearing the mask of everyday conversation. That is the moment awareness replaces automatic compliance. That is the moment you stop participating unconsciously. And that is the moment your decisions become fully yours again. The end.